Welcome to the Manhwa world. Please like and subscribe my channel, thanks. An offer was given pretending to be the daughter of a Grand Duke. Would you become my daughter? But why does someone have to become a princess? The real princess has died because of extreme fever. This offer is given to the girl from the empire of the Grand Duke. Her name is Elena. She is confused. Had I just said no? I could have avoided it. Dying such a miserable death. What does it matter that I rose to a very high society receiving all the adoration and attention? What does it matter that I wore fancy dresses with lavish jewelry? What does it matter that I was selected to become the first queen consort of the empire? Despite that, nothing in this world truly belongs to me. Well, it was a trap. The real princess is alive. Her name is Veronica. The sword is inserted brutally into her back. She was near death and was locked in a secret prison. This place was known to only kind and the queen. She was in a miserable state, having a cough. And just the just-born baby of Prince Veronica was taken away from her. While coughing, Veronica said, "You planned this from the very start." The king said, "Don't blame me." All he did was extend his arm and say, "You are the one who chose to take it." The king said, "You have no shame." The queen said, "Don't need to go far." She started to walk towards Veronica and said, "We set this plan in motion a long time ago." Standing in front of Veronica, she said the truth. She pretended to be dead and needed someone to assume her identity. The entire empire will assume Princess Veronica is alive, but she will be replaced by a new one. The one who will fulfill the demands of the queen and king. Clever queen said to die, "Veronica, your role is finished now." Injured and poor Veronica said to the queen, "You have seized my station, His Majesty's love, and our child. You have taken everything from me." The happy, joyful queen said, "Veronica, are you crying?" And consoled Veronica by saying, "Don't despair, I appreciate all your hard work, and I shall reward you good. You see, I'm more warm-hearted than you think." The queen held the child named Ian of Veronica, and the king said to Ian goodbye to his mother, "She'll be dead soon." Luckily, Elena and Veronica look similar. But Elena belongs to a poor family. And by giving some money to her parents, the king and queen will take advantage. Dying, Veronica screams by saying her child's name Ian and then, my boy, and cries a lot. The selfish queen said to Veronica, "I won't harm your child just yet, so don't need to struggle hard. You are never going to hear him call you mama, but I will," said the queen to Veronica. The child Ian started crying in the queen's arms. The queen said to Veronica, "Then me and the king would have had a child of our own, don't you think?" The injured and crying real Princess Veronica screamed at the queen and said, "That's when I will reunite him with you, you devil." The king said to fake Princess Veronica, "We have wasted too much time." The fake Veronica said to king, "Though I was having so much fun that I did realize how much time had passed." While leaving the real princess in the injured form, she said, "Since I don't even know your name, I can't say goodbye properly, and well, at the very least, know that you have done a fabulous job." The poor and injured Veronica in jail only passes her hand and cannot say anything. A girl in the open atmosphere roamed and named Elena. "It might be hard to believe, but my life reset," Elena said, "and I just returned to the time just earlier to make my debut, back to when I was 18. She woke up blank and thought, what were all those years then? Asked herself. Blank Elena said, "I still remember everything so powerfully." Blankless Elena, "Why did I go back 5 years? It would be better if it was only a year, but 3 months are better enough," said Elena. The dagger lying down on the floor. "That's all I had to prevent and control a tragic death," Elena said. "Also, Ian's not here." Then she realized that Ian didn't even exist and was not born yet. Someone called her, Elena. Elena followed the voice and said, "Coming?" "You," the stranger standing said to Elena in a relieved voice. "There you are." Elena said, "What do you mean?" The stranger said, "To make your debut aggressively." Elena said to him, "Please calm down." Elena in her thoughts thinks, "That's exactly as I said this morning. I don't wish for anything grand." The stranger said her father was once a well-respected public administrator in the capital. However, due to my grandfather's failed business ventures, we lost everything and ended up in the countryside. Now we are a destitute family of nobles surviving on the stipend from Viscount Callide. Now we have nothing to put towards my high society debut. Until the Viscount donated funds to cover the costs. What was the catalyst? Asked Elena. The stranger replied to her, I understand your concerns, but I truly do not wish to enter the high society. It was all good for Elena, but she was too young to understand the situation the stranger was making her understand. But just being able to make your debut benefits the range of your prospects for a husband, said the stranger. Do you realize this? Asked by the stranger. That holds on meaning to me now, said by Elena. I must not rely on others lest repeat the mistakes of my past, said the stranger. Elena asked, do you not find it odd? Elena thought about the stranger, about his offer to act as her benefactor, and asked herself if his motive was entirely altruistic, and moved on her way. Then, she asked herself, as my patron, can he not force me to become the mistress of some elderly merchant? Would I be allowed to refuse? She thought about the stranger's talk about protecting herself from everything, and said, you cannot protect me from these things? She was overcome with the talks. This is a trap laid down with extreme care. His support can become a debt, which then becomes shackles. Those shackles become an impossible bind for our family. The stranger came and said, Elena, he could truly try to help you, perhaps you are being too cynical. She said, what if this trap was set by someone other than the Viscount? He may be nothing but a puppet, while the true villain is lurking somewhere else. A girl named Veronica graduated with the highest marks ever obtained at the Imperial Academy. She wields emotional manipulation with deft precision. She was one of the highest-ranked nobles. The stranger said to me once, I must be able to spot the thorns hidden on a beautiful flower, the woman who taught me how to rise to the top of high society. River has come to this territory. A cart where the driver is sitting said, we have arrived, and I hope your journey was pleasant to Veronica. She came here to ensnare and whisk me away, said Elena. It was hardly a difficult one given my purposes. Yet Veronica still lives, they need Elena. Elena said, this time I won't be used and discarded like before. Are you certain your words that she won't regret it? She thought, and said that won't be the case. She thought that I don't care if this is the worst decision. I'm sick of being under someone else's thumb. This time the ending will be different. At night the sky was covered with darkness and some bright stars. It was time for dinner. The table was filled with different kinds of delicious food. Elena admired the food and said the food was so yummy in delight. Elena's mother was going to sleep and delightfully said to her husband, it's too nice to see you eating so well. The husband said, my dear, if you are still concerned about some terrible occurrence, we can request a formal contract. And asking would help change your mind. Elena's father said to her wife, I wonder where you inherited your stubbornness from. Elena's mother delightfully admired him and said, darling, rather than attempt to sway Elena, please try to respect her decision. Elena's father replied, but this is such a momentous opportunity for her. There is no need to rush. We don't have to overexert ourselves for a grand debut. There will be other chances to find a good husband besides our daughter who can hold her own anywhere. Elena's father replied, I'm just worried, that's all. I will handle your father, Elena. Don't worry, said the mother. Elena said to her mother, Mama, thank you. Elena's mother said, when I was doing laundry I noticed Elena's clothes were covered with dirt. There were even rips in some places. Elena said, I went to Mount Laos earlier. Elena's mother said again, perhaps you should spend less time there. There have been several reports of beast sightings of late. Elena said, yes, of course. I had planned to stop anyway. There is no need for me anymore. I will head to my room then. Elena's mother said, all right. Elena has been quite preoccupied recently. Something seems different about her. Yes, I'm preoccupied with something of great importance. Elena opened the door of the big secret library in the house, and then started deciding which book I should choose. Elena finally found a book to draw. She was so glad that she completed the drawing in time. It's sloppy because I drew it myself, Elena said. But it's more accurate than any map currently for sale. This should be simple enough to follow. Even Veronica won't anticipate such a route. She saw her childhood photo with her parents and said, "I will save you this time. In my previous life, I was unable to look after my parents once I left home. I swallowed the lies of Veronica and focused entirely on my survival. I was completely unaware that my parents were murdered the night I left the territory. I had no idea. I won't repeat the same mistake." She asked herself if it was still early in the morning. I'm up early again. Before the reset, I have always awoken at this time." Elena was sitting on the bed and an unknown voice said to her, "It is time for you to wake up, Your Highness." She thought this habit would prove difficult to break. "Well, I suppose an early start to the day is good." Elena says, "Mama?" Her mother asked, "Why are you awake so early?" Elena replied, "I only just opened my eyes." And said, "I will help you, my mother." Mother said, "Thank you, dear." Elena started to cut the slices of the bread. And said, "Its smell is so divine and good." She thought I would have found all this dull in my past life. She yelled sweetly and said, "Father, it's time to do breakfast." As she said that, she thought I would never have imagined this time to be so precious. As soon as they sat at the table, Elena murmured that it was quite too loud outside. Father said there must be a carriage passing by. I have to go and check outside. He stood up from his chair and went outside to see what was happening. A man knocked at the door and said to Elena's father, "Baronet Friedrich, it's me, Grace." Baronet said, "Grace?" Baronet opened the door and said, "What brings you here?" When Baronet, Elena's father, opened the door, he saw some people carrying crates on their shoulders and was standing with Grace. Baronet in hesitation said, "What's all this?" Grace answered him, "These are all crates from the lordship as gifts for you." He questioned, "Gifts?" He replied, "Please accept these tokens of his intentions." Baronet said, "Well, we need to understand his intentions first." Grace passed the envelope towards the Baronet and said, "Lord instructed me to give you." Baronet said, "A letter." He opened the letter. After reading the letter, his face started getting frozen and slowly his hands started trembling. He held at his bay. Baronet aggressively said to return all this immediately. Grace said, "But sir, why not?" Baronet said, "Didn't you hear me?" Yelled, "Take everything and leave immediately." Elena's mother asked Baronet, "Darling, what did the letter say?" Holding the letter in his hand, Baronet replied, "Oh, you don't need to worry." Baronet crumpled the letter and said, "You also don't need to read it either." Grace said to Baronet, "My apologies, sir, I couldn't fulfill your request. I will just leave these things here and take my leave." Blown, Baronet said angrily, "Grace." Baronet started glaring at Grace with the crumpled letter in his hands. Elena, standing watching, said, "Father, may I please read the letter?" Father yelled, said, "There's." Elena replied, "But it involves me." "Does it?" Father replied pleasantly, "My dear." Baronet clenched the letter tightly. "So it certainly seems that way since it concerns me. I wish to read it," said Elena. Elena grabbed the letter from her father. Reading the letter, she passes a smirk. And said, "This letter is a sort of marriage proposal, which means these chests are essentially wedding gifts. To be exact, the Viscount is asking me to become his mistress." The old me should have sobbed over this news. "I thought you might make such a play, Veronica. After all, I must be pushed to the brink. So that I will grab your hand out of sheer desperation." "Baronet," said Elena, "do not concern yourself with it. This is too one-sided and offensive. I am going to visit him and request that he retract the proposal." "Yes, I think that's a good idea," said Elena's mother. Elena loudly replied, "No. It's all right, Father. I'd like to make my own decisions." She murmured in her mouth, "Veronica trap was set once she involved my family." What are you saying, Elena?" "Please wait a moment," said Elena's mother. "Can you please inform my response to him that we are happily accepting these gifts?" Father said. "Elena, accepting gifts of this nature signifies an intent to accept the proposal. Are you saying you are willing to live as a mistress for the rest of your life?" Elena replied, "I have no choice. Who knows what terrible thing happen if I refuse?" Father replied, "I don't want that. Don't despair over this. You wanted me to find a good husband, don't you, Father?" said Elena. "So I shall accept." "I'm sorry, Mama, sorry, Papa." Baronet thought this was the pure agony. Elena's mother said to accept her fate so serenely. It feels as if this is all our fault, said the baronet. Worried Elena thinks and says, I'm sorry for hurting you. This is the only way to keep my family alive. Standing Grace watching the whole scene said, I will hurry back and share this joyous news with my lordship. Well, goodbye then. Elena's mother said, Elena, I don't think you should go through with this. You are not lacking in any way. There's no need for you to do this. Don't cry, Mama. I'm all right. This isn't yours or Papa's fault. Don't worry. I intend to live happily, said Elena. This isn't right, says Baronet. We didn't raise you to become a mistress. Elena put a hand on her father's shoulder and said, this isn't your fault, I am just making the decisions. It's not too late. If I can leave now, I can still save you. Elena replied, Papa, if you trust me, please don't worry and let me make my decisions. I shall show you how I will change the story this time. Elena, who had locked the door, leaned her back against it. I hurt you both too much. She regretted having to go this far. Let's not look back. Let's just look ahead. With a strong grip on her weakened heart, Elena walked toward the wall with a determined expression. She pulled the curtains that had been installed to prevent drafts in winter. Memo papers the size of a palm were stuck to the exposed wall. The future for the next 5 years. These memo papers were a chronological table of events that would occur in the future. She dared to say that history would unfold as it was written here, with Elena at the center transformed. Elena removed a piece of memo paper from the top. Birthday banquet of Duke Rosette, first owner of the Friedrich family. This was the biggest reason Leobrick wanted to hurry and take Elena. This important event was only 2 months away. It was this day, the first day I stood in front of the world pretending to be Veronica. Bad rumors had spread throughout the capital after Veronica did not appear in society for a few years, suggesting she had fled with a servant at night and that the Grand Duke had released knights to capture her. The ambitious Grand Duke had no choice but to be sensitive to her reputation to make Veronica the Empress in the future. He needed to eliminate the rumors as soon as possible, and the surest way to do that was to show the aristocracy that Princess Veronica was alive and well. I'm looking forward to it. I didn't know what to do back then and I blindly followed your orders, but now I have no reason to do so. It was Elena who took the lead on the board. Even the Joker, who could flip the board at any time, was in her hand. It's your turn now. Chasena looked pitifully at her daughter, who had come out of the room early in the evening. She had no choice but to pretend to be indifferent, knowing that no words would be comforting or encouraging. Do you want something to eat? How about your favorite steak? Mother will make it for you. Mom, you don't have to strain yourself. I'm really fine. Elena smiled and walked toward the front door. Proposal gifts were laid out just as the porters had piled them up in the morning. Let's open this together. I wonder what he sent me. But if you open it, Chasena worried that once the gifts were opened, there would be no way to return them. Don't regret it. It's too late to run. Elena, who had given up, calmly opened each gift wrapped in silk. The first box she opened contained a dress with lace. It was a bell-lined design, but the material was poor and the finish was lacking. At least the accessories were worth using. Because it was produced in traditional ways, it was classified as a specialty in other countries and was highly appreciated. Mom, come here for a moment. What's wrong? Elena reached out and hung the pearl necklace she had just found around Chasena's neck. The brilliance of the silver pearl complemented her slender long neck. It looks good on you. Use this, Mom. What? It's fine. I don't need it. You can keep it. Chasena looked serious. She felt guilty for not being able to stop her from becoming a concubine, so she didn't know what to say. You haven't had a decent necklace this whole time you raised me. I really want to give this to you. How could I possibly? Come on. If you keep refusing, I'll be sad. Elena insisted, even though she knew Chasena didn't want it. There was a good reason for that. When I leave, you will need money. Remember that time and keep it with you. Elena focused solely on the future, not the present. This was like the wealth they sold their child for, but when the time came, the necklace would be a useful source of income. Father is late. I'm home. Honey! Only after confirming that it was Baron Friedrich who had opened the door halfway did Elena feel relieved. Why are you so late? You're hungry, aren't you? Sit down, I'll reheat the soup. Wait a moment, honey. I brought a guest. Guest? Chasena, just heading for the kitchen, stopped and turned. He had never invited anyone to the house since they settled here. She couldn't believe he suddenly invited a guest. She felt embarrassed by Baron Friedrich's unexpected behavior. Come in, it's a bit shabby though. Baron Friedrich politely offered the guest a seat as if treating a superior. The guest was cloaked in a generous hood that reached her ankles. Nevertheless, her slender shoulder line and pure white skin that shone beneath the hood suggested she was an adult woman. Elena's eyes widened. Don't tell me, she tried to pretend to be okay, but the sense of incompatibility stirred her emotions. Uncertainty gradually turned into certainty. You don't have to die, my dear. When Elena looked at him in silence, Baron Friedrich smiled meaningfully. You will soon find out what I mean. Let me introduce you. This is... I'm sorry to interrupt, but could you give me a chance to introduce myself? It's to be polite. The woman's voice was clear as she suddenly cut him off. The clarity of her voice had a magical power that broke the tension. Baron Friedrich responded happily. Oh, if that's convenient for you, it's okay. Thank you for your understanding. The woman's gaze reached Elena. It was covered by her hood, so she couldn't see her eyes well, but the glance seemed to penetrate deeply. As she pulled the hood back, her beautiful yet intelligent face was revealed. She fixed her alluring gaze on Elena. Nice to meet you. I'm Leobrick de Flanders, a noble of the Vasilia Empire. It was the worst reunion. Elena's heart, which recognized her at a glance, cooled down. What a surprise. Contrary to the expectation that her blood would heat up in hatred and revenge, her mind was clear. There was no room for feelings to intervene. The ice-cold attitude dominated her perfectly, and whispered incessantly. Hold your breath and wait for the right time. When the time comes, bite the nape of the neck at once. I'm Elena. Elena hid her creeping claws behind an awkward smile. She was at the height of the Imperial Society, so she was good at hiding her true feelings under a mask. I know about Miss Elena. I know her very well. You know me well? Leobrick smiled softly. It was a warm smile that made the viewer feel comfortable, just like that of an angel. The abominable woman. Elena felt nauseous and twisted for a moment. That smile had fooled her. She believed that the favor was true. The result was a sword in her abdomen and a tragic death. But now it was different. She knew the truth, so she wouldn't be deceived anymore. She could only pretend to be deceived. It's true, Elena. Father? She came all the way to see you. Baron Friedrich adhered to her favorable attitude. He had come in contact with Leobrick in advance, and she guessed that some progress had been made in conversation. Honey, what does that mean? She promised to save our Elena. She doesn't have to become a concubine. What, really? Chasena was taken aback by her husband's curt reply. She had a strong sense of diminishing what, where, from, how to accept it. Elena pretended not to know anything. Save? Me? You don't have to become a concubine, dear. The eyes of Baron Friedrich were full of life. She wants to take you to the Empire. Elena looked moderately surprised. She also didn't forget to look at Leobrick on the path of anticipation and anxiety. Leobrick, who was waiting for a response, responded with a feverish smile. Before explaining the situation, would you believe it if Miss Elena looked the same as someone else? It's hard to believe. Leobrick took out a pendant with a smile. It was the family sentence on the lid that caught the eye at once. The X-shaped swords and spears carved over a pair of golden eagles were surprisingly colorful. Grand Duke Friedrich. It was an unforgettable name for Elena. The lid opened when Liabrick pressed the button on the side of the pendant. Oh my God, my dear! Chasena looked back and forth at the portrait and Elena, with her eyes widening big again and again. Isn't this you? The woman in the picture resembled her exactly, as if she had modeled Elena. They looked so much alike that it would be easy to guess that they were twins. The only difference was that the woman in the portrait had gorgeous, beautiful blonde hair, unlike Elena who had red, golden hair. This is the lady I used to serve. She was elegant, and had class unlike any other nobleman in this empire. Is she alive or dead? 3 months ago, she fell asleep in the arms of the goddess Gaia. The Gaia denomination was the state religion of the Vasilia Empire. A religion that worships the goddess of earth, Gaia, and believes that they fall asleep in the heaven created by the goddess Gaia after death. May God bless her. Elena placed a hand on her chest and carefully mourned her death. Her worried expression and gaze seemed to indicate that she was truly saddened by her death. It was an astonishing and hair-raising performance, but since she had been passing through imperial society, even this was just a natural part of her daily life. Thank you for the condolences. I have no doubts that the young lady has found peace by the side of the goddess Gaia. It is just that it is difficult for the rest of us to live and rejuvenate the pain. You were close. Yes, we were close like sisters. Still, I'm trying to bury my heart little by little. The real concern is what I'm worried about. Her father hasn't accepted his only daughter's death for over 3 months. Chasena nodded with a sad heart. That's what every parent would be like. If it was our Elena, we would have been the same. At his wife's words, Baron Friedrich's expression hardened, as if he didn't want to even think about it. For a parent, the pain of losing a child is incomparable to the pain of having all 5 organs cut off. The one who said there was nothing in this world that he couldn't have, and nothing that he couldn't try to get, cried. He said that if he could see his daughter just once, there was nothing more he could wish for. I'm afraid I know it's a wish that will never come true. It's impossible to bring a dead person back to life. I thought so too. I couldn't believe it when I heard the story of the merchant who saw your daughter on the other side of the continent. Liebrick's eyes were fixed to Elena. It was the moment when the spinning story finally reached its essence. Miss Elena, will you be his daughter? Surprised by the shocking suggestion, Elena couldn't speak with her eyes wide open. As if only Baron Friedrich had been told beforehand, there was no reaction. At the same time, she also did not forget to skillfully push Elena to urge her to make a choice. I know, but I'm offering you this because I don't want you to be a concubine and be unhappy. I've seen countless times how miserable the end of a nobleman's concubine is. I don't want Miss Elena to follow the same footsteps as them. Elena lowered her gaze with her lips clenched. She also did not forget to show signs of conflict with complex expressions. Follow her. Honey? Elena raised her head and stared at Baron Friedrich. The father's expression was already determined for his daughter. I've seen the pattern before. A ruined noble family like us can't even dare to speak. It would be better than now, nothing would be lacking. Father. Go. Go and live a new life, Elena. Chasena, who was embarrassed by the sudden development, also changed her mind about Baron Friedrich's active attitude. Yes, dear. Do as you please. Mom. Chasena pretended to be calm, clenched her teeth and worried that Elena wouldn't go if she saw her tears. Mom and Dad. Elena also bit her lips hard. She was heartbroken at the sincerity of the two telling her to leave because they couldn't protect their child. I thought being a concubine wasn't bad either. If I couldn't change it anyway, just give up. That way I could barely endure it. Elena's heartbreak, which carefully shed out, broke the couple's heart once more. They thought the reason she matured more recently was because she accepted the reality that she could not change, so she felt so pitiful and hurt that they could not stand it. I'll go. There was hope in Elena's eyes that she could escape this sick reality. How will I live if I become his daughter? It's a life that can't be defined in a word. But I can tell you this for sure, that the world will revolve around Miss Elena. You can achieve anything, you can have anything. Anything? Anything. Elena had a puzzled look on her face. You can wear the finest dresses a few times a day, and you can make and wear jewelry every day with rare gems from the north. And balls, tea time, banquets. It's a very different life, so it's difficult to list them individually. Let me assure you one thing. Whatever you imagine, it's more than that. Leah Brick deliberately brought out fantasies that young minds of that time might have had. It was based on the judgment that Elena, who had a poor childhood, would have admired the life of this aristocratic spirit. Beyond imagination, Elena, who had been speechless for a while, pretended to be careful and took out the words that she was looking for a chance. May I then take an oath with a knight? The corners of Liebrick's mouth went up in a smile. The presence of an honorable article among the ladies of society was an ornament that made them stand out and an object of shared love. They often accompanied prestigious knights to gatherings, and the emotional strife among the ladies led to duels among the knights, who sometimes questioned their superiority. I think I know what Miss Elena wants. You want to keep a noble knight from the literature Roland's song by your side. Is that right? Yes, that's true. Facing Elena's eyes, Leah Brick smiled graciously. It's the right of Miss Elena to elect a noble knight to protect the lady. Wait, really? Elena opened her eyes wide. She looked surprised and delighted as if she had never expected such a favor. The greatest knight in the family will have the glory to serve Miss Elena. I'm so happy that I can't speak. Elena was overwhelmed with joy. It was a snobbish smile in Liebrick's eyes, but Elena had no intention of hiding the joy of this moment now. It was Elena's wish to destroy them. But what happens to my parents after I leave? I'm worried that the Viscount might harm them. Elena's concern was justified by common sense. It was extremely likely that the Viscount, who was broken up with, would lose his pride and get angry. You'll be hurt because of me. I can't leave. The expression of Baron Friedrich, who was listening quietly, suddenly hardened. It's a useless worry. Your father will take care of the rest. We're fine. Just take care of yourself. Elena ignored both of their words. With eyes only on Leah Brick, she hoped that she would come up with a solution one way or another. Leah Brick smiled as if there was nothing to worry about. I've already set up a place to take them. Really? Ha, I'm finally relieved. Elena felt a wave of relief sweep over her chest. Although she was acting, she must have been seen as a daughter of filial piety. Perhaps because of such a habit, Leah Brick took out a high-end silk pouch that looked heavy from her arms and placed it on the table. When Chesena opened the pouch, she was surprised. This is gold, isn't it? We'll serve you without shortage, but I'm giving this to you for the sake of Miss Elena, who is worried about the two of you. Think of it as a little sincerity and keep it. Leah Brick smiled. She smiled as if she was appealing to a family that she cared so much about. Elena, who was puzzled, bowed lightly and thanked her for her consideration. She also never forgot how to express her gratitude with a smile. However, her mouth smiled but her eyes did not. Leah Brick was a woman who would put a sword through her back as soon as she turned away from her family. No, we don't deserve this. Take it back. I can't take this. No, I'm not going to take it. The couple waved their hands with a serious look. Why don't you take it from Miss Elena? Please. When Elena begged with earnest eyes, Baron Friedrich reluctantly accepted it. I'll take it. Only then did Elena really feel relieved. It will be a necessary seed for her parents, who will live far away from the Empire. The Viscount will be on the move once the sun rises, said the lady. Chesena asked, so soon? The lady replied, Chesena, since the proposal is accepted, we cannot afford to waste any time. We must depart tonight, and cross the border to avoid being tracked. Chesena sadly says this is all so sudden. As soon as the Reaveric passed our threshold, I had an inkling to might need to set out today, said Elena. Even though I foresaw it coming, it is still difficult for me, so from Mama, thought Elena. Chasena begged in front of the Riaveric, just one day. Please, can't you please give us only one day with our daughter? Baronet came and stopped Chasena from doing all this stuff. Chasena started crying and said, I know, but I cannot bear to let her go. Elena with her family enjoyed having a picnic. After some time she thought it would be difficult for me to be a part of them. I thought that would be enough. Riaveric came and apologized to Elena's parents and said we absolutely must leave tonight. Riaveric used the Viscount as her excuse, but it's their side that's in a hurry. Elena says I will go with you, but I would like 2 or 3 hours to spend with my family. Riaveric answered Elena, I will grant you only 2 hours then. We really must hurry off. Elena said yes, that would be enough. Riaveric said that I would begin preparations for our journey, then I would return shortly. Chasena touched Elena's cheeks and said, when did our daughter grow up so much? You used to cry over the slightest thing. It felt like you always be my baby. Don't worry about us, just focus on yourself. Don't let your resolve weaken now, Elena. Now is the time to move. My beloveds, you must now listen to me carefully. You have to leave before Riaveric comes back. Chasena questioned Elena's leave. Where to? Didn't we accept her help? Why the sudden plan changed? Elena said, I expected this reaction. Do you not find it strange? It was odd enough when the Viscount stepped forward to suddenly help this poor noble family. But when declined, he tried to turn me into his mistress. What's even more absurd is that once we were backed in a corner, Riaveric appeared. As I think it is all planned. The plotted twist was the Grand Duke family need me. As soon as I saw the crest, I knew. Elena gave an envelope to her parents and said, take this, it has all things that I have written and why you have to leave. And what the future plans. I will stay here because the Duke's family needed me in any case. Elena hugged her parents and said goodbye. Elena took a look at the empty house. She patted the dining table as she walked over. Her hand led her through her bedroom, full of memories, and into the living room, full of family laughter and happiness. For a brief moment, Elena's face looked even more peaceful as she reminisced about the past. She was alone on her lonely path, and there was nothing like an hour with her family to give her the strength and drive to sustain her life. By the promised time, Riaveric knocked on the door without a single error. It's time to leave, Miss Elena. I'll be right out. Elena, who raised herself from the chair, put her hands on her chest and breathed deeply a couple of times. Then, she brought out the feelings of parting that had been pressed in deep. When she recalled the situation in which she had to break up with her parents in her past life, she was overwhelmed with emotions. Elena went to the front door only after seeing that her eyes were red. Elena came out through the slightly open door. She covered her mouth with her hands to hide her slightly bloodshot eyes and sobbing, which made her look pitiful and unfortunate. Let's go. What about your parents? We forcibly separated and only I came out. I don't think I'll be able to leave any longer, so I want to leave now before I change my mind. Elena's last words were close to pleading. She seemed as if she was about to collapse, so Riaveric nodded slightly. Sir. At her summons, the man who had been behind her stepped forward. Despite his robes, he had a stout physique that could not be hidden, and a single sword at his waist suggested that his status was that of a knight. When we leave, please take care of those two. Be polite and courteous so that Miss Elena is not worried. I will. A familiar voice made Elena take a breath. When she glanced at his face without a grain of doubt, she was infested with unbearable hatred and indignation. I didn't know you were the chauffeur who came to pick me up, Sir Lawrence. The knight of the oath that once defended her with loyalty. A knight of honor who she kept by her side even after she became queen. However, when Veronica returned alive, the knight ruthlessly put a sword through Elena's abdomen. The loyalty he swore before Elena was false, the oath was hypocrisy, and the honor that he cried out was nothing but pretense. She still hadn't forgotten. She remembered what he had said clearly. I have never for a moment thought of you as my lady. Now that my lady has truly returned, I will kill you with my own hands and seek forgiveness from the real queen. Ah! His true feelings were more cruel than the pain of iron that dug into her flesh. The sense of betrayal and loss she felt was as great as the depth of trust. It couldn't be expressed in words. Now that she saw him, she figured he was the one that killed her parents. Naturally, her hatred doubled. Let's not dwell on the past. He is now nothing but a chess piece. Elena was worried that her old feelings toward him may make things go wrong. One day, he would pay the price for her disdain, but it was not yet the time. From the standpoint of aiming to overthrow the Grand Duke, she could not be swayed by petty emotions. I've got a carriage outside the estate. We'll have to move in secret up to there. Elena quietly followed in the footsteps of Leobrick, who walked ahead. As Elena turned around, Lawrence bowed silently. Although it would have been to show the virtues of a knight, to Elena's eyes, knowing that he was soon to go after her parents, it was nothing but hypocrisy. Hurry up, we'll be late. Yes. Elena set aside her gaze and hastened her steps to narrow the distance away from Leobrick. When she went through the dark Zelkova forest, they reached a road leading to the southern part of the territory. There was a luxurious carriage standing in the corner of the bushes. Get in right away. As soon as she got in, the horseman cracked the whip. Nay, nay. As the cry of the horse tore the silence, the wheels started to roll. Feeling the vibrations in her hips, Elena threw her gaze outside the window that changed visually. Elena's gaze deepened in the moonlit landscape. It was a night that was no different from any other. The only thing that had changed was Elena's mindset, but the world looked different. Don't worry too much. Leobrick, as if to reassure her, reached out her hand. As long as Miss Elena decided to be his daughter, she won't be neglected. I'll take care of you. Thank you. Thanks to you, I can relax a little. Elena smiled and squeezed Leobrick's hand tighter. An expression of trust that she believed in her. An act that felt sincerer than 100 words. Leobrick was convinced she had come under her control. Don't say thank you, we're like sisters now, aren't we? Elena held back a reflexive burst of laughter. Sisters? She was looking forward to seeing how long this pretense relationship would last. Lawrence stood up from the fence he was sitting on. Considering the distance of the carriage, the woman's stride, and the gate, by now it was time to leave. Lawrence, who had no reason to delay any longer, recalled the mission. Kill Elena's biological parents. Cut the buds that may be a bother in advance. Leobrick said it would be the way for the Grand Duchy, and he would so with hesitation. For the glory of the Grand Duchy. That value was the only pride that made him breathe as a knight. Lawrence pulled the sword from his waist. The moonlit blade shined with chills. Soon this new white sword would be dyed red. Lawrence's expression that crossed the threshold hardened. He didn't feel anyone inside. He instinctively sensed something was wrong and rushed through the room. Baron Friedrich and Chasena, who were supposed to be there, were nowhere to be found. Did you run away? Lawrence was frustrated. They were here until a little while ago, but they ran like a bolt in the blue. Like they evaporated. He didn't understand how they knew about the threat that was coming to their bodies. Now's not the time to care about that. I need to trace them. Lawrence's eyes gleamed as he looked for their footprints in the dark. Leobrick nodded. Even if Elena was very ignorant, it could be assumed that if she is called a princess, she'd be able to deduct that she was the family of the Duke. I'm going to be a real princess. Elena pulled out the silly memories of her past life of joy as she thought about becoming a high-ranking noblewoman. There was no comparison between living as his own daughter and being adopted simply because of her resemblance in appearance. How her heart fluttered and filled with joy at the thought that she, too, could become part of a noble lineage when she first came into contact with this fact. But it was all fake. Elena swallowed her abominable anger. Instead, she recalled her birthday with her family last year. She recalled the happiness of the day, the joy spread to Elena's face like a snowflake. To deceive Leobrick. Elena constantly controlled her emotions and acted. That's not all. Princess Veronica comes up and down in the mouth of the social world every year as a companion of His Highness the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince? Leobrick fanned Elena's insatiable burning desire. It's common to say that dreams are dreams. But if Elena makes up her mind, dreams become reality. That's the position of Princess Veronica in the Empire. Elena laughed as if she couldn't hide her joy, revealing her gums. She hoped that Leobrick belittled her frivolous appearance, and thought of her as pathetic. Hoo-hoo. Leobrick laughed low. She was able to get a glimpse of Elena's desire through a smile bright enough to see Elena's gums. It was only a little taste, but she was already blinded. Leobrick knew better than how to deal with such a human. She didn't even know how deadly of a misjudgment that was. Oh, I'm sorry. I've been disrespectful enough. Elena covered her mouth with her hands and smiled, pretending to be ashamed. She also did not forget her ability to handle the situation in an effort to hide her embarrassment. On the other hand, I'm also worried. What if they suspect that I'm not the Grand Duke's real daughter because of my ignorance? Leobrick waved as if not to worry. You can make it so that they won't doubt it. How? I'll teach you. I'll make you the queen of society with a classy, elegant, and undaunted authority. As if her heart was overwhelmed by those words, Elena replied with her hands on her chest. I'll try. I'll be sure to. Mom, Dad, did you get away safely? She suddenly remembered her parents. If they had been riding the rapids on the ferry as planned, they would have passed through the northern part of the principality by now and reached the border of the kingdom of Royer. It was more likely that they were traveling east, taking advantage of the rugged terrain of the northern mountainous region and the rare censorship of the passage. They must go to the Empire. I'm sorry, I suddenly remembered. My mom and dad. Miss Elena. I couldn't do anything for them. I only just got here, please call me Liv. It's my nickname. Elena stared. Leobrick could see how much Elena was dependent on her right now through her shaking eyes. Believe me, I can't right now, but after some time, I'll make sure that your letter of regards is well received. I don't know how to thank you, Liv. Elena didn't say no, she was held and comforted. The appearance was so gentle that she could have been mistaken for a real sister. Leobrick laughed at the pathetic Elena. She even had a vicious idea of how to use Elena's filial piety. On the contrary, Elena's eyes were so rational that there was no room for emotion to go in. Today's tears and the Tittle sister are a mix-up for that time. From now on, you and I are fighting. The sunset set in silence. The sun setting over the horizon colored the sky red and then disappeared. Soon it was the pitch-black darkness that filled the void. Leobrick was standing on the terrace of her room with a teacup. Lawrence came and said to Leobrick that Elena's parents are missing. When I came home they were not there. They're gone? Leobrick doubted her ears. She thought maybe she misheard it. When I came, the house was already empty. I followed their tracks, but when I reached the middle of the mountainside their footprints were cut off, so no further tracking was possible. Lawrence, who was close to the wall, replied in a somber tone. It was hard to notice that there was a person unless you looked closely in the shade where the moonlight could not reach. Tell me in detail. The footprints cut off? It seems that they reached the middle of the mountainside and went along the stream. Leobrick's eyebrows wiggled. Along the stream? They seem to have not left a trace. Leobrick was overwhelmed. It was hard to believe that the couple ran away, but they erased the traces as if they had anticipated the chase. I found and tracked the wet sand, but the trail was completely cut off from the canyon ferry. Have they run away on a ferry? That's all I can say. I tried to track them down, but the current was too fast. I'm sorry. Throughout the report, Lawrence did not raise his head. This was because he failed to fulfill his responsibility as a knight. It's not your fault. This is my mistake. Leobrick looked back at the ridiculous situation. You ran away? Not even a trace? You can make 100 concessions and run away. Because parents are the ones who can jump into the fire if they think they can be a burden to their children. The escape method was meticulous. A skilled technician would have taken a path so optimized that it was impossible to track. Could she dismiss this as a coincidence? She couldn't shake the impression that they had anticipated the danger and fled. It doesn't add up. It was not that there was no doubt at all. However, it was not easy to draw conclusions because either was clear. It was weird. I can't believe her parents didn't even come out to say goodbye to their daughter. Those who cared about their daughter that much did not see her off. This was a questionable point. There are two kinds of families. The fact that the couple left Elena alone was in order to get time to escape. This was the subject of fleeing. Elena may have known that the couple had run away, but pretended not to know in front of me. Leobrick recalled Elena crying when she arrived at Silence. She said she only had her as an older sister and begged her to take care of her parents. If she was an accomplice, there would be no reason to do that. What if the tears were meant to deceive me? Leobrick shook her head hard to get rid of the root of her thoughts. It was a delusion. Elena was neither clever nor brilliant enough to deceive Leobrick. She also lived as a fallen aristocrat, so she had a deep sense of inferiority. Give up tracking them. Give me your orders. I'll make sure to search the continent for them. And somehow I'll clean them up. Lawrence wanted to recover his tarnished honor, but Leobrick refused to allow it. I don't want to leave any regrets, but I don't think there'll be a problem right now. Please step back. I understand. Hide yourself for a few days and get on the ship. It's difficult if you encounter Miss Elena for nothing. Lawrence nodded reluctantly and left himself in the dark. He was already gone. She couldn't even hear his footsteps as he left. Leobrick raised her chin and looked up at the night sky. It's not refreshing. There must have been something, but she was frustrated that she didn't know what it was. It was an annoyance that she hadn't felt in years. I need to check. Are you really trying to deceive me or have I overreacted? Before dawn, a carriage carrying Elena and Leobrick ran down the icy streets of Silence. Miss Elena, I heard about your parents at dawn. Really? What happened? Did they get out of here safely? Elena became a devoted daughter when she heard about her parents' news. She was so desperate that Leobrick couldn't believe it was acting. They're safely out of the land. That's fortunate. Thank you, Liv. Thank you for your concern. Leobrick narrowed her eyes. But I heard that your mother's health is not good. Perhaps she was overwhelmed in the process. What? Oh, what's wrong with my mother? Is she in a lot of pain? Where does it hurt? It's my fault. She's so heartbroken that her body is. Elena fussed half-heartedly and immediately nodded off. There was a trickle. Drops of water fell under her head and soaked the road. Mom, ugh, Mom! Elena cried out sadly, her voice raised in nostalgia and worry. It was painful, like a child separated from her mother. Leobrick narrowed his eyes. She had deliberately given Elena false information, hoping that she would react in any way if she had been involved in the couple's escape. But what a surprise! She was too sad to imagine the fact that the couple had escaped. You don't seem to know a thing. Leobrick bit her lips. Don't cry. The physician said it was a temporary fever and that she could get better soon if she took a rest. She must get better, or I won't have the confidence to live in the Empire. Of course. Elena managed to calm herself down and wiped her eyes with her handkerchief. They both must have arrived at the Mariana Islands by now. And Mariana Islands the earthly paradise? Yes, it's called the best island in the world. Leobrick lied brazenly. The Mariana Archipelago had been referred to as a paradise on earth through oral fairy tales and novels, but the reality was quite different. The islands were crawling with pirates, and the waves were so strong that fishing was not easy. Elena was happy to pretend that she didn't know that. I've heard that too. I'm relieved if that's where they are. I hope they don't have to struggle and live comfortably. That's what they're going to do. Looking at Elena, who was naively relieved, Leobrick had no choice but to question the doubts she had. That's her level, and I'm the only one who's sensitive, aren't I? Elena consistently showed substandard appearances. Even so, it drove her crazy that she doubted Elena. Inwardly, Elena was relieved to see the anxious Leah Brick. Leah Brick is suspicious of me. That means my mom and dad ran away safely. Elena was glad to have Leah Brick's doubts. It was clear that her parents safely ran away from the pursuit. Otherwise, there was no reason for Leah Brick to doubt Elena. When they arrived at the warehouse wharf behind the pier, they disembarked from the carriage. Then the middle-aged Nagi who was driving the carriage led them to a ferry that was tied up at the end. Through the fog, they moved farther from the land. The boat reached the rear of a huge and colorful sailing ship. "We go up?" Leah Brick, Elena, and the middle-aged knight got on the ladder and boarded the ship. Perhaps it was still early in the day, but there were no crew members on deck. Perhaps that's why they couldn't be bothered. Leah Brick passed the deck and stepped into the ship. She walked until she reached the cabin at the far end of the corridor where the candles fluttered. Opening the creaky wooden door, she found herself in a spacious cabin that was furnished in a rather luxurious manner. At first glance, it looked like a luxury cabin that could be used by a high-built aristocrat or royalty. As soon as she came in, Leah Brick locked the cabin door tightly. "You'll be staying here with me for the next 10 days. Elena forced a smile, barely holding back her upset stomach. "What is the duty of the nobles?" "Noblesse oblige." "Imitate those words, and in the future, Miss Elena will become a nobleman who will be respected by nobles. This is the duty you have as the princess, and the legitimate daughter of Grand Duke Friedrich." Wait, the Grand Duke? Elena stuttered at the end and raised her head. She was embarrassed as if it wasn't possible even if that was true. "Princess Veronica is the sole blood of Grand Duke Friedrich, the head of the 4 great families of the empire. It's also Miss Elena's new identity." "Oh my God!" For a moment, Elena's mouth poked up. "Gee, Grand Duke! That's more than I can imagine." Even if she tried to pretend she wasn't, Leah Brick was convinced as she saw Elena's mouth rising as if it was going to tear. She was a snob blinded by desire. "That's enough for today. And now? We're leaving the ship?" Elena was able to leave the cabin in almost 10 days. In the meantime, she felt a little better after spending some time with Leah Brick and letting the sea breeze carry away the resentment that had built up in the cabin. They climbed over the railing, onto the ladder, and onto the ferry, just as they had done when they boarded the sailboat. After more than 3 hours of rowing, they arrived at a beach along the coast. They stepped on the slippery sand and climbed out of the beach and onto a carriage. Hidden in the bushes. "Liv, where are we going?" "The safe house." "Are you not going?" "It's a very private place. Even in the Grand Duke's residence, few people know about it." Leah Brick turned her head out the window. It was an indirect expression she did not want to continue the conversation. Elena also shut her question. It was a compulsory question, anyway, and there was no reason for her, who already knew the destination, to ask. The carriage really ran without ceasing. Even though the road was not maintained, the carriage did not stop despite the difficulties in discerning where to go due to the darkness. Without a single moonlight, they finally reached the mansion that she thought was not home. It was located in a secret place, so secret that it could never be visited if you didn't know the way, as it was a forest on all sides. Elena's expression turned cold as she looked at the exterior of the mansion looming in front of her. "There's the place that drove me to ruin." Try as she might to remain calm, Elena's heart raced with a distraught passion. What would she look like when she saw him? How would she be able to withstand this boiling anger in front of him? Many thoughts and uncontrollable emotions were constantly colliding in Elena's mind. The carriage stopped just in time. When she got off the carriage following Leah Brick, a maid greeted her. "She's Jane, take a step forward. She can't talk because she's deaf, so if you need anything, you can write it down in a notebook and show it to her." As soon as she exchanged greetings with Jane, she followed Leah Brick into the mansion. A parlor decorated with marble appeared as the splendid chandeliers went straight across the corner to the right of the main hall. "He's beyond here." "He?" As soon as he heard that Miss Elena was coming, he ran from the capital. Leah Brick carefully put her hand on the doorknob and pushed the marble door open. Elena's heart beat fast, too. An unruly storm of emotion swirled from the inside, as it did when she first faced Leah Brick. There was a man standing in the distance. As a middle-aged man, he was upright enough to be indifferent to his age, and was a man of dignity enough to be considered a specimen of the aristocracy. Elena recognized who he was at a glance. How could she forget? She could still remember his laughing at Elena, who was dying. "Why you?" "Really?" He saw Elena and couldn't speak easily. His swaying eyes and trembling lips, his expression that went back and forth between joy and despair like a saint witnessing a miracle in front of his eyes, was too unflattering to be alone. Moreover, she got goosebumps when she realized that it was an act spelled out in hypocrisy and deceit. "Did you come back to life?" "My daughter?" The mastermind who drove Elena to ruin. A man who could chew it. It was Grand Duke Friedrich coming towards Elena. Elena bit her molars tightly. Her fists rolled small and an unaffordable rage shook like an acorn tree. She could still see his face, mocking her for her death. The idea that he was so hateful as to want to kill him was in her head. "I have to put up with it. I can't be carried away." Elena constantly suppressed herself. Killing that human to relieve her resentment was a bad idea. What Elena wants is not only Grand Duke Friedrich, but also the complete destruction of Leah Brick and Veronica. Until that day, she would be angry and wag her tail like their faithful dog. "Are you really Veronica?" Grand Duke Friedrich asked and couldn't take his eyes off of Elena. "Well, I'm..." Elena, standing in front of him, lowered her eyes without even making eye contact. Grand Duke Friedrich extended his hand at Elena, who was at a loss. "Shudder." Elena shrank back as the back of his hand touched her cheek. It gave her goosebumps. There was a sense of uneasiness like a bug crawling on her face. Grand Duke Friedrich swept her cheek with the back of his hand, dismissing that Elena must have been surprised with the sudden contact. "I miss your warmth, so I couldn't stand it. Thank you for letting me think I've met my dead daughter again." She wanted to applaud the abominable performance of Grand Duke Friedrich. How could he be so brazen about the living Veronica? "I didn't really take care of her because I only cared about the outside. I lost my wife and daughter. After I lost my precious people, I had no power or wealth." Elena stood silently listening to his confession, which was not even a grain of truth. "My dear." At a low call, Elena lifted her head. "Will you be my daughter?" Grand Duke Friedrich spoke kindly to Elena, whose eyes were shaking. "Live on behalf of Veronica. If I could watch the child's unfinished life through you, I would have no regrets. Can you do that?" "Oh, of course. As long as you don't mind." Elena blatantly coveted the seat of the princess. "I have to look like a woman blinded by success. That way, you'll underestimate me." There was inexplicable contempt in the eyes of Grand Duke Friedrich. It would be disgusting to him, who values the nobility of his birth, that an insignificant girl was excited to pretend to be a noble princess of the great house. "Actually, I haven't felt like a stranger since I first saw you. I'll be a daughter without shame. Father." When Elena added the word father, with her strength, Grand Duke Friedrich's face was distorted for a short time. Grand Duke Friedrich was a man who was filled with aristocratic pride and authority of the nobility. He was insulted and humiliated just by bringing in a vulgar woman, who openly coveted his daughter's vacancy in a noble family. "It's late. You must have had a hard time coming, so go up and rest." When Elena bowed, Leah Brick chinned down to follow her. When Jane opened a door in the far corner of the second floor, there was a bedroom decorated with high-end wooden furniture. "Get some rest. Order for her if you need anything." "Yes, good night, Liv." When Leah Brick disappeared from the room around the corner of the hall, Elena waved her hand and told Jane to leave. She didn't have anything to do, so she wanted to be alone now. Thump. Elena, who was left alone in the room after the door closed, burst into a suppressed laugh. When she remembered the distorted face of Grand Duke Friedrich, she felt that her old body aches had gone down. In her last life, Elena was impatient to see Grand Duke Friedrich's glance. When she looked at Elena, who was inadequate because she had not received proper education, he could not make eye contact and bowed his head as if she was a sinner. Oh, why did she do that? If she thought about it, the thing that was held in Elena's hand was as good as theirs. She was just stupid and couldn't handle it properly. I'm looking forward to seeing how you hold your breath with the name and status you gave me. Despite the fact that Princess Veronica's reputation was stuck in the mud, education was the reason why Elena was brought to the safe house instead of going straight to the Grand Duke's residence, to build up the basic skills to pretend to be Princess Veronica. In the morning, she learned mainly about the manners of the aristocrats, table manners, speech, walking, and greeting. The afternoon focused on understanding and learning the national identity of the empire, starting with the imperial language, history, literature, and culture. The formal classes ended before dinner. Don't try to rest. Review and familiarize yourself with what you have learned today. Is it too much? Then go and learn, even if it means less sleep. Elena was forced to stay in her study until late at night. No, it would be right to say that she was embedded in the study of her own will. I say I know the future, but right now I don't have the ability or knowledge to take advantage of it. Elena used this time to fill up her lack of knowledge. The history of famous paintings, the arts and philosophy, the merchant-dominated continent, the value of moving money, the alchemy of makeup. Elena's selected books were mainly focused on the arts and commerce. There will be a change in the art world of the empire soon. Elena paid attention to the Renaissance that would blow across the empire. The Renaissance was a time of cultural innovation in thought, literature, art, architecture, natural science, and music, which could be used to accumulate great wealth. The new era is an opportunity for me. Changes in the times are bound to be accompanied by such labor pains. Elena wanted to be the leader of that era. She could see what it had to do with revenge, but the Grand Duke's family was not a single family that could easily fall apart. If it did, it wouldn't have been the best family in the empire for hundreds of years. I have to use the trend of the times to shake the Great Duke inside and outside. First, she intended to act like Princess Veronica and divide the Grand Duchy. She would cut off funding sources and find embarrassments that could be made public. At the same time, she planned to apply pressure on the outside. She planned to lead the era as a woman with a third name, El, and become a person respected by the intellectuals and nobility of the empire. Based on public respect, reputation, and justification, she would reveal the evil deeds committed by the Grand Duke so far and isolate him with criticism and pressure. It was only Elena who could act like Princess Veronica and intervene deeply in the work of the Grand Duchy. Of course, it's not as easy as it sounds. But Elena was confident. The plan was completed after hundreds of verifications, and the detailed platform was already filled in Elena's head. She was already looking forward to it. The time to stay in the safe house was only 3 weeks at the very least, and she was excited to move to the Grand Duke's residence as soon as possible and complete the blueprint for her revenge. And 3 weeks passed like a lie. The restaurant with the high ceiling and the table stood outstanding. Sitting at the end of a long table, Leah Brick and Elena cut the steak with elegant hand movements and put it in their mouths. There was no sound of chewing, and the jaw did not widen beyond a certain interval. Each used 4 forks alternately to eat the dish. It was impeccably perfect table manners. Now you look quite aristocratic, Leah Brick commented on Elena's table manners, wiping her mouth with a napkin. It's all thanks to Liv's sincere teaching. You're also good at speaking in terms of praise and affirmation to other people's praise. At first, Leah Brick's criticism continued, but Elena looked so aristocratic that she could no longer find any flaws that did not force her to find anything annoying. Really? I'm glad Liv told me so. Leah Brick stared at Elena as she gracefully took a sip of her wine. The true value of etiquette comes when it is learned so naturally that one is not even aware of it. This is why the daughters of aristocratic families are groomed from an early age, and why they have endless teachers to remind them about etiquette. In less than 3 weeks, she's not here to entertain. She made it on her own. It's like a lie. Although she was originally an aristocrat, she was a fallen aristocrat who lived just like ordinary people. Considering that she was not even good at basic etiquette, Elena was now a completely different person. She was not simply good at etiquette, but used it to make her physical lines stand out. It was not too much, but natural. That kind of elegance could not be found even in social circles. She must have been well versed in the etiquette of the empire. It's a flaw that she's not very smart with her manners. Unfortunately, Elena wasn't brilliant. She was only to meet the passing line of Liebrick's required learning level. Well, it's more than I expected. It's only a month. It's not enough time to transform Elena, who has lived as a commoner, as a depraved, downcast, into a real aristocrat. Considering that, it was safe to say that Elena had become quite aristocratic. If you're done eating, let's go up. She followed Leah Brick, past the central hall, and went up to the second floor. They walked straight along the high-quality carpet to reach the library, but for some reason they just walked past it. We passed the study? We're going to the drawing room today. Elena, walking behind, guessed the meaning of her words without difficulty. Oh, today was the day to memorize portraits and personal details of the nobility. Seeing portraits of influential aristocrats in social and imperial politics, remembering their faces, and understanding what happened to them meant that there were not many days left to face them. As far as she could remember, she went to the Grand Duke's residence after memorizing the personal information for 2 days. Arriving at the drawing room and sitting on the sofa, Leah Brick had no hands on the piled-up portraits and personal details. The thickness was more than a snake. It's a list of imperial and capital nobles who are active in the imperial social world. There's this much? Some are skipped, and the list is filtered. What Leah Brick said was true. The number of nobles officially conferred by the imperial family accounted for nearly half of the entire population of the entire duchy. Remember everything. From the names and faces written here to the family background, family relationships, and itinerary, write it all down. Because any time you meet them, they will feel like friends and family you spent a long time apart from. You can do it, can't you? Yes, I'll try. Leah Brick brought a portrait of a middle-aged man with a mustache on top of a pile of papers and an explanation of his personal details. This man is Duke Wit. He is the head of the house of the Duke of Buckingham, one of the 4 great families of the empire. He is also a very close friend of His Excellency the Grand Duke, and has cared for Princess Veronica since she was a child, as if she were his own daughter. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes, I'm putting him in my head. No, you don't understand at all. Liebrick's eyes grew sharp. Listen. The closer they are to Princess Veronica, the more you must be alert. If you run into this person, he'll find out that Miss Elena is a substitute. Oh, I see what you mean. I'll be careful. Leah Brick did not repeat the same thing anymore, as if she liked Elena's alertness very much. It was very tedious and confusing to memorize each portrait on the list, which was close to several hundred, and to remember the identity statements. Elena had a lot more to memorize, Leah Brick added. Still, Elena didn't think it was a big deal. It's even harder to find a face I don't know. Elena reigned as a social flower and rose to the top as the queen. It was a routine to meet with the royal family or nobles on the list and face them, so it was impossible not to know. Let's move on. Leah Brick reached out and laid out the next portrait and personal details on the table. Elena's eyes shook sharply, wary of another obvious aristocrat. Claudius de Sion, the crown prince who will succeed to the throne of the empire in the future. There was no sound in Elena's ears. She couldn't take her eyes off the portrait, and her eyes were filled with indescribable joys and sorrows. The man she once loved more than herself. But the man who never shared a single warmth. and the man who blamed himself for the child's entry. Even though he gave birth to a descendant who would succeed the royal family, she still couldn't forget how he was despairing and blaming himself. My momentary mistake eventually drove the Millennium Empire to hell. Soon after the birth, Elena burst into tears in her sorrow as soon as she heard his lament. She was still blood-stained. She knew the emperor himself had no affection for her, but how could he say such cruel things to a woman who gave birth to his own child? After that day, Elena stayed away from Xian. She no longer longed for the emperor's affection. She didn't have the talent to endure without hate and resentment. Why was I so? He and I couldn't live together from the beginning. I didn't even know that, and was obsessed with him and resented him. After her regression, she finally realized why he had driven her away and forced her to hate him. The emperor was trying to strengthen his imperial authority. The Grand Duke had even produced the queen, and his power was so great that he had hit the sky. These two politically different people were at odds with each other, making it impossible for them to coexist. Dazzled by their own ambitions, Grand Duke Friedrich and Leobrick had done what they should never have done. They poisoned the Empress to make me the consort. It was a barbaric act caused by the fear that the Empress might give birth to a legitimate crown prince. At the time, Elena didn't even know it was the work of the Grand Duke. She couldn't even guess the inner thoughts of the Emperor, who was angry at the death of the Empress and glared at her as if to kill her. All of this could only be learned by looking back at the series of events more dispassionately since her regression. Why he hated and resented Elena so much. The closer the truth came, the more she was able to force herself to cleanly calm her emotions of that day, which had been filled with love and hate. Your Majesty, I will never stand next to you again. This was the string of bad relationships that left nothing but hurt and hate for each other. She believed it was right to cut the string rather than to follow up on the same mistake. Are you listening to me? Elena came to her senses and was surrounded by Leobrick's eye daggers. Oh, I'm sorry. When I saw His Highness the Crown Prince, I lost it. He's so handsome. Will the real thing look even more handsome? You'll be seeing him soon, so see for yourself then. Ah, really? Oh, I'm so excited. I'm already looking forward to that day. Leobrick glanced at Elena, who was shy like a girl, and gave out her details. To do that, you must be familiar with the Crown Prince, right? Make sure you understand every single word. Elena nodded blankly. They had spent several years together as husband and wife, despite their bad relationship. Xian was not interested in her, the daughter of a political opponent, but Elena, who craved his affection unilaterally, was not ignorant of every little detail. But the fact that her gaze fell on him so often was probably due to the unrequited love they had shared, even if only briefly. By sunset, only a few thick portraits and personal details were left. It's the last page. Elena, who had been reluctantly taking classes pretending to be enthusiastic, looked at the face of the remaining portrait. Even though she looked enthusiastic, the anger that had been piled deep in Elena's heart grew. You son of a bitch? Ren Bastache. That man, better suited to motherfucker than his own name, was the successor to the renowned Viscount Bastache and was Veronica's second cousin. According to the genealogy, he was the grandson of Princess Veronica's granduncle, who was the younger brother of her grandfather. Although they were relatives, strictly speaking, the Bastache family were servants. Her grandfather, the then Grand Duke of Friedrich, had formed a 100-year-long treaty with the family of servants, in which they could be independent on the condition that they would take care of handling the Grand Duke's dirty work. Of course, at present, the treaty was still in effect, and they obeyed the Grand Duke. For that reason, they were brimming with sources of trouble. Ren was the most dangerous servant in the world. If he had a chance to kill his owner, he would. Wait, come to think of it, Ren had suspected me of being a fake since the first meeting. Why? She suddenly had a question. How could Ren be sure that Elena was a fake Veronica less than 10 minutes after he encountered her? No matter how young you were, you wouldn't have seen each other many times. Elena recalled her first meeting with Ren. She looked back to see if she missed anything. He certainly didn't suspect that I was fake at first. There must have been something that Elena missed that solidified his suspicions, clear as day. If only she knew what it was. What if? Elena unwittingly patted the back of her ear. Fluffy and smooth skin were passed on to her fingertips. Of course, she didn't have the scar that was supposed to be on Veronica. I heard Veronica never had her hair tied up. She was afraid that the scar behind her ear would be revealed. I'm sure. The scar was nothing more than a disgrace to a noble woman. It was understandable to be sensitive, and hide it even though it wouldn't be obvious behind the ears. How was it? Elena's mouth corners were slightly raised. If it were not for Leobrick, she would have laughed freely, but it was a pity that she couldn't. I'm not going to be swayed by that son of a bitch anymore. I can just make a scar. Ren was a man who shouldn't be associated with. As a result, it would be hard to suspect that Elena might be a stand-in. Ren Bastache. He is the heir to a family independent of the Grand Duchy, a relative of the princess and her second cousin. If they were related, would they have been close? No, they didn't really get along. To start with the conclusion, never get close. Leobrick was also wary of Ren. It was because he was an ambitious and dangerous man to be bound by the 100 Years' Treaty. All figures have been identified with tips and advice on the dangers of Ren. Remember everything by tomorrow. There should be no small confusion. Minor mistakes in human relationships are irreversible. I'll try. Leobrick added words to Elena, who was not confident but showed enthusiasm. I won't accept mistakes. From now on, everything is real, so there's no turning back. If it's real, don't tell me. Leobrick calmly continued as she watched Elena, nervous about anything she could guess. In 2 days, we're leaving here and going to the Grand Duchy. Standing by the window, Elena stared down at the four-wheeled carriage parked at the entrance to the mansion. The carriage is ready. Shall we go? Yes. Soon, the horses neighed, and the wheels began to roll. You managed to stay composed. They're knights but remain inferior to the princess. You don't have to respond. That's a relief. I was worried I'd seem awkward. Elena looked concerned, as if still wearing clothes that didn't suit her. You must control your expressions, Elena. Are you aware of that? Yes, Liv. Elena answered reflexively, and Leobrick's sharp gaze fell on her. Again, I must have warned you. Yesterday, a woman named Elena died. Have you forgotten who you are? I'm sorry, I won't make the same mistake again. Remember that you are a princess. Don't be nervous. Leobrick tightened the pressure, ensuring Elena wouldn't slip. She added that all the maids who served the deceased Veronica were dismissed, so it was okay to adjust. This was her way of controlling Elena with both carrot and stick, without realizing Elena's deception. As I mentioned, in 10 days we have a banquet for Duke Rosette's birthday, a founding contributor to the Empire and the first Grand Duke. By then, you must be the perfect princess. Yes, I'll try. While enduring Leobrick's nagging disguise as advice, the carriage crossed the capital, finally reaching the mansion. As it passed through the garden, she saw the Gothic-style building ahead. Soon, the carriage door opened. Welcome, princess. The butler, servants, and maids lined up, each greeting her in unison. Elena raised her chin proudly, inspecting them. No one dared to look up, intimidated by her commanding gaze. Veronica! She heard the excited voice of Grand Duke Friedrich from inside the mansion. He came out with open arms. She barely restrained herself from laughing at his pretense. It wasn't easy to heal, but I'm so glad to see you well again. Thanks to your concern. Grand Duke Friedrich laughed heartily at her polite response. How can it be due to my concern? It's thanks to Goddess Gaia. Come now, don't stand there, let's go inside. Yes, father. Elena and Grand Duke Friedrich, who pretended to be reunited as a close father and daughter, moved to the drawing room, with Leobrick quietly trailing behind. Savoring the rich tea from the east, the three began their conversation. You've changed significantly. I can see it in your aura. Grand Duke Friedrich noted the transformation in Elena's bearing, a noble presence not just in appearance but in nature. I still have much to learn to meet father's expectations. I'm proud of you. Truly, you're like my own daughter. The great house is your home, so make yourself comfortable. Thank you, father. Elena responded with submissive grace. In just a month, Grand Duke Friedrich was pleased at how she'd shed her vulgarity and embraced nobility. Although, you must be tired after your journey. Rest well. Thank you for your kindness. Rising from the sofa, Elena accepted Liebrich's advice. You remember the layout, correct? Go to your room. Yes, don't worry, Liv. Elena smiled reassuringly and left the drawing room. Grand Duke Friedrich, watching her leave, spoke with satisfaction. She's like a refined young noble, don't you think? That's only on the surface. She lacks true depth, and a single conversation will expose her. Grand Duke Friedrich looked impressed by Liebrich's awareness. Isn't that a problem? With the birthday soon approaching, I'll use her recent illness as a reason to limit her contact with the aristocrats. I trust you'll handle it well, Friedrich replied, his faith in Liebrich unwavering. Your Excellency, however, there's been some unusual activity from the palace. Of course, just more prying. Share the details. They continued discussing the Grand Duke's matters, none of which were unimportant. Meanwhile, Elena left the room, the maids lining up and bowing their heads. She recognized familiar faces, Jane, Misa, Lunarin, and her eyes fell on the freckled girl at the end. Elena's gaze turned cold as she remembered Anne, the maid she had once trusted, who later revealed herself as a spy for Liebrich, and had stood by when Elena was kidnapped, showing her true allegiance by ignoring Elena's pleas. Seeing her again, Elena's expression hardened. Just wait. I'll make sure you understand the despair I felt. As Elena stared silently at Anne, the girl hesitated. I'm in, and started, but Elena cut her off. Did I give you permission to speak? I'm sorry. Again? With your lack of comprehension, I doubt you're fit to serve me. Stumbling, and shut her mouth. Elena felt no relief even at the thought of slapping her for her betrayal. Enough, she told herself. There was no need to arouse Liebrich's suspicion by doing anything excessive. Staying within bounds was essential. This time, the returning princess would be seen as one who kept subordinates in check. As Elena turned, and seemed to breathe a little easier, continuing down the corridor, the maids followed Elena. She stopped at Veronica's room. What are you waiting for? Open the door. Trembling slightly, and hurried to comply. Elena stepped inside and glanced at the familiar furniture, curtains, carpets, shelves, and pictures, feeling discomfort. They expect me to use what Veronica did? The idea disgusted her. In her past life, she'd accepted them unknowingly, but no longer. Turning to the closet, she instructed Anne. Take it all out. What? Do I need to say it twice? Take them all out. Elena opened the curtains and called Anne, instructing her to tell the butler to send for a skilled tailor and woodworker and to send a message to the tailor to bring all the dresses and embroidered curtains he had at his shop. After some time, Anne returned. Miss, the dressmaker Lucien has arrived. Tell him to come in. When the permission was given, Lucien's assistants and servants diligently moved the dresses, embroidered curtains, and carpets into the drawing room. Elena left the terrace and entered the room once Lucien had fully set up his work. Greetings to your highness, the princess, Lucien said. Thank you for coming. I heard from the butler that you were in charge of the dress for the birthday party. Yes, it was actually a call to measure. Let's look at the design, she replied. Lucien nodded, signaling his assistant to bring the design notes. As she reviewed them, her expression remained heavy, causing him to grow nervous. Don't you like it? He asked. The line is fine, but the lace is unconventional. The patterns and designs are also quite classic. Is it? If you have a style in mind, we'll reflect it, he offered. Though changing the design now would make it difficult to complete in time, he didn't show it, knowing it was an order from Princess Veronica. All I want is a dress fitting for my socialite status, like the Milky Way in the night sky, something with starlight, she explained. As starlight? He asked, wrinkling his eyebrows at her abstract request. When illuminated, it becomes more colorful. A dress that makes me stand out like the five-color Milky Way in the night sky. Galaxy Milky Way. Just imagining a dress with breathtaking starlight is fascinating, she mused. Oh, I think I understand. I'll prepare with all my energy, Lucen replied with determination. Elena watched him silently. Don't try too hard. Just bring an ultra-high-priced dress with expensive jewels like rubies, sapphires, and pearls. She knew it would fall short. The rush time and excessive glamour would ruin the harmony of the design. It doesn't matter to me. She didn't want the dress to attract attention. She had a plan. She would drain the Grand Duke's wealth. Just the thought thrilled her. Elena spent limited money, as controlled by Leah Brick, like an allowance, but saw no reason to continue with this limitation. Starting with the birthday party, the nobles would recognize her as Princess Veronica. She was as good as real, as society saw her. She no longer intended to spend within Liebrick's control. Elena planned to be the continent's most luxurious woman, ensuring the Grand Duke's fortune, endless as it was, would be hers to tap into. Her purchases of dresses, jewelry, shoes, and accessories would later be resold as her secret fund, especially dresses with low-value jewels, which wouldn't devalue as much. Oh, don't tell anyone but me that you changed the design. I want to surprise not only my father but the aristocrats attending the birthday. I'll keep my mouth shut, he assured. Elena shifted topics after selecting several more dresses. That's it for the dresses. Let's see the embroidered curtains. Yes, these are curtains with snowflake embroidery on northern silk. After a full explanation, Elena picked out the curtains and carpets she liked and had them installed in her room. After she finished these tasks, Liebrick's behind schedule? She should be here by now, Elena thought, sipping tea on the terrace at sunset. My lady, Viscountess Liebrick is here. Tell her to come in. The Empire's laws permitted even women to hold titles, so Liebrick was known as Viscountess. When she entered the parlor and saw Elena seated on the terrace, her eyes widened. I need to have a long talk with Her Highness, so you stay out, Liebrick instructed the servants. Once Lunarin stepped down, Liebrick approached Elena on the terrace, where a cold breeze blew. Liv, are you here? Sit down. The taste of black tea with the sunset is excellent. Liebrick's expression turned cold. What are you doing? She asked sharply. Yes? What? Elena, caught off guard, set down her cup. I warned you not to act without permission. You burned dresses and curtains, summoned a dressmaker and carpenter? I told you to ask me before doing anything. Did I need permission for this? She asked, her eyes tearing up, maintaining an innocent expression while Liebrick repressed her irritation. So you thought you didn't need permission? I thought I could make small decisions without bothering you, Elena replied, her voice wavering. Did I do something wrong? You should have asked. Didn't you think it might raise suspicion? Liebrick's suspicion was met with Elena's innocent confusion. Why would I be suspected? Liv, what did I do wrong? Tell me, and I'll make sure it won't happen again, she pleaded. Liebrick was momentarily silent. No one would suspect Elena as a fake. She'd expelled anyone familiar with Veronica. To most, her behavior would simply appear capricious. Social gossip is dangerous. Contact with outsiders could spark it. Liebrick explained. Oh, I understand. I'm sorry. I'll get permission even for minor things from now on. Please forgive my mistake today, Liv. Reluctantly, Liebrick nodded, though it felt odd, as if she'd lost control. Elena, on the other hand, was deeply satisfied. She'd evaded interrogation and gained something valuable. You want permission? I'll give it. If she had to comply, she'd follow Liebrick's wishes, but that wouldn't be as beneficial for Liebrick as she assumed. Liebrick was always pressed for time. Her workload was beyond imagination, as there was no place in the empire where the power of Grand Duke Friedrich was unrivaled. It was difficult to find anything out of her reach, from the top trade issues to the private meetings of the aristocrats on the periphery. Leobrick took off her glasses and stroked her dim eyes. It's too much time to go from and into the duchy. However, it was an unavoidable choice. The absence of Princess Veronica was a big blow to the succession composition of the Grand Duchy. In particular, Sir Rin of the House of Bastache, who had become independent from the sideline, was young in years, but he was not an easy man. By now, Grand Duke Friedrich was alive and well and breathing, but when Princess Veronica's absence was prolonged, there was a high possibility that he would suddenly emerge as the successor to the Grand Duke, citing his bloodline. In order to prevent this from happening in advance, she had to go to the other side of the continent by herself and indulge in the hassle of bringing Elena. It was the best option for Leobrick, but the piled-up approval documents and the agenda to be processed were enough to make even the smart woman tired and sensitive. Knock, knock. The knock startled Leobrick. She was sure she arranged not to let anyone in. "It's me, Liv." It was Elena who opened the door without permission and bowed her head. "I'm sorry, I heard you told me not to let anyone in." "No, don't stand there. Come in." As she spoke with a sense of displeasure, Elena, who had noticed, quietly entered the room. "You told me yesterday to ask for trivial things and decisions." "I did. I don't actually have any shoes that I can wear, so it looks like I'll have to see a shoemaker and order them separately. Would that be okay?" "Yes." Elena's expression brightened when Leobrick accepted lightly. "Really? You said you needed it. Tell the butler to bring back one of the best craftsmen in the capital." "Thank you very much for your concern, Liv." Elena fluttered her skirt as if she couldn't hide her joy, leaving the office. Leobrick returned her gaze to the pile of papers. The sudden visit had disrupted the flow of events, but she didn't feel safe without every care to manage and control Elena, who was still an inadequate substitute. And maybe an hour or so later? According to the report, Viscount Bianca has had unofficial contact with the imperial family. It was when she was worrying about the troublesome treatment. Knock, knock. Elena was sticking out her head as she lifted her head reflexively to the knock. "Sorry to interrupt, Liv. I have a question." "What's going on?" asked Leobrick, holding back her irritation. "After dressing up, I didn't have any necklaces or earrings to wear. Tell the butler to bring in a jeweler in the capital." "Can I really do that?" Elena twinkled her eyes. "Is there anything else you want to talk about?" "Yes?" "No." "Then go out." Elena left the office nodding. Leobrick, who became sensitive after being disturbed twice, turned to the documents again. The accident that she had been immersed in quite deeply ended, so she wasted a considerable amount of time to continue thinking again. Knock, knock. But Elena's interference, which she thought would be over, was just beginning. "I'm sorry to keep bothering you, but Liv, not anything else, but the jewelry is expensive. How many can I buy?" "Buy as much as you need." Leobrick's voice had also become neurotic. This is because her concentration keeps breaking, and the efficiency of work processing has been ruined. Elena said she knew and promised not to interfere again, but returned. But soon there was another knock. "How much exactly did you say I should buy? As much as I needed? I've never bought as much as I needed in my life." "Buy it for yourself. As much as you want. Do you have to tell me everything?" "I will." "She won't bother me anymore." It didn't take long to realize that it was an illusion. Elena visited Leobrick without a break, like a child who needed her mother's permission. "The maids say natural cosmetics are in trend these days. I'd like to buy some of them, can I?" "Really?" starting with a sloppy request. "Vanilla tea smells so good, but it's not in the mansion. I really want to try it." Even asking permission for personal and trivial things. Is she playing with me? Liebrick's patience had also reached its limit. She felt like she wanted to warn her to stand still by slapping her. But she couldn't. 10 days later, it would be the birthday of the first Grand Duke. The first thing to do was to put out the urgent fire, but it was difficult to leave a scratch on Elena's face or create a minor disturbance. Liebrick clenched her molars. I'm going to have to give it to her after the anniversary. The next day, around dawn. In order to finish her slow work, Liebrick was confined in the office early. She liked this time zone. A quiet morning was the best time to maximize concentration. Her brain also became faster, and the processing of work had accelerated. Knock, knock. Until she heard the knock that was causing her neurosis. Hey, I woke up early and thought I'd take a walk, but the lights were on. I came by to say hello, but I didn't bother you again, did I? Liebrick's face, which broke her composure, became as cold as ice. Looking back, no one had ever touched her patience this much. Even Grand Duke Friedrich, who claimed to control the empire, gave her will and respected her. How dare you, little girl? Liebrick bit her lips hard. She had a slight taste of blood in her mouth. It was to maintain the patience of reaching the limit. Elena, who felt that the atmosphere was unusual, was intimidated and was flustered because she didn't know where to put her eyes. I am sorry. I'll come back later. Liebrick, who barely caught up with the patience that was almost cut off by the word again later, opened her lips. Come in. Can I? I just prepared the tea, so I don't think it's cold yet. I'll just deal with this document, and then we can talk. Elena sat on the sofa across the desk. Liebrick wrote something on parchment paper while savoring the tea from a teacup with warmth, and put it on the table. What's this? It's a guide to be familiar with inside the house. Elena's gaze turned to the parchment. It stated the rights that could be exercised within the residence, the scope of which, and the appropriate line that should not be exceeded. 1. You do not need permission to meet merchants, dressers, carpenters, etc. Only those who are arranged through the butler can be met. 2. Every 10 days you will be allowed to use a maximum of 20,000 francs. 3. Report the schedule every morning. 3. And move according to the schedule with permission. However, never break the routine of the schedule. 4. Find me only on conditions that do not fall under these provisions. Otherwise, act in accordance with the guidelines of the article. Clause 1 aside, Elena snorted, noting Clause 2. I'm a princess, and you want me to spend only 20,000 francs? For 20,000 francs, 10 horses of good breed can be bought, which is equivalent to the living expenses of common people for several years. How much was it? I think I spent nearly 100,000 francs for 10 days to maintain dignity right before I became a queen consort. That was roughly the amount of money she spent to maintain her dignity in the situation where she had been mentioned as a candidate for the throne. Compared to that time, it was a tremendously small amount. Well, I can ignore it anyway. It was a pointless restriction. Despite the fact that the limit had been struck, if she put it on the Grand Duke's tab in the name of Princess Veronica, he would have to pay. Was it possible for the socialite Princess Veronica to turn into an unscrupulous debtor who doesn't pay for things? If so, the reputation of Princess Veronica would plummet, and at the same time, the prestige of the Grand Duke would fall to the bottom. This was because the honor of Princess Veronica was directly linked to the body of the Grand Duke. So there was no reason to care about the limit. Elena noted the third clause. Schedule reporting. In her previous life, Elena moved with permission after reporting to Liebrick every step of the way. This was to control and monitor Elena, who was clumsy to Veronica. I have to make good use of this clause. Do not break the rules suggested by Liebrick. It would only foster unnecessary hostility and vigilance. She had to play inside thoroughly. Just interpret and use the rule in a way that was advantageous to Elena. Did you memorize it all? Yes. Liebrick took the parchment to the candle and burned it. Black ash flew about. I'm telling you, Please refrain from asking about personal actions. I feel more comfortable with the guidelines. I know what to do and what not to do. For the first time in a long time, it was a perfect word for Leobrick. She hoped for Elena, who is good at only what she is told to do. I'll get permission from my schedule today, since I'm already here. I don't want to interrupt Liv again. Yes, do that. This is how it should be. Leobrick regretted not having controlled her with restrictions from the beginning. Elena held a pen on the table and pondered. After much consideration, the parchment was divided into her morning and afternoon schedule. You're supposed to meet with a jeweler in the morning, and go for a walk in the patronage in the afternoon, right? The back garden was so big that I thought it would take all day to look around. Leobrick nodded. There seemed to be no need to worry about anything particularly disturbing. I'll give you permission. You know what, Liv? Elena hesitated and rolled her eyes. Do you have anything else to say? The appointment of the night I mentioned before. When, I was thinking about it anyway. Really? Oh, my heart is pounding already. Then when can I see my knight? Elena looked excited like an immature girl. Soon. I've been looking for a knight to match the princess. Is he someone I'd look good with? He's a promising knight even within the Grand Duchy. He has excellent swordsmanship, worships chivalry, and most of all, he wants to have a beautiful princess beside him. Oh, beautiful princess? Did he say that himself? Yes. Elena formed a dream of ecstatic affection. When the reaction seemed to have been halfway over, Leobrick drove in the wedge. There are many great knights in the world, but I dare say he is the only one who fits the princess. May I ask his name? It's Sir Lawrence. Oh, that's a great name. I can't wait to meet him. Leobrick nodded satisfactorily. There's nothing wrong with that. Let's have a cup of tea this afternoon. Ah, really? Then I'll see you later, Liv. Elena turned excitedly after finishing her business. Lawrence is a good knight for me? To keep an eye on me. The expression of shyness was nowhere to be seen. She felt uncomfortable because it was so obvious that she was trying to wrap Lawrence up as a mass product and stick him next to Elena. Look forward to it. I'll appoint the best knight you can't even imagine. Elena left the room quietly. In the afternoon, Elena left the mansion dressed lightly. I want to walk for a long time in the sunshine. Accompanied by her immediate attendants, Elena walked quietly through the patronage. The back garden had a completely different feel from the previous one. Whereas the garden seemed to be artificially manicured, the back garden had been preserved in its natural state with the lake at its center. I was very disappointed to see the back garden of the palace. It was not that the patronage of the imperial palace was poor. The patronage of the Grand Duke was only too good. Elena walked endlessly across the tranquil lake landscape and the cloudless, high, clear sky. Elena's footsteps had a definite destination in mind. The training ground beyond the Zelkova forest. Located on the outskirts of the patronage area, it was a kind of physical training ground built to enhance the basic physical strength and strength of knights, apart from the main training ground where swordsmanship is mainly practiced. Ha! Yup! As she walked around the corner of the Zelkova forest, she heard the chanting of the knights. As she crossed the thick forest, she could see an open training ground at a glance. Aren't you the princess? A local knight bowed his head in embarrassment. Other knights were also embarrassed by the sudden visit of the princess. James, head of the 2nd Knights Division, greets you. How did the princess come to this humble place? A middle-aged knight with a nice mustache asked about Elena's intention to visit. I was just walking and I found myself here. Did I interrupt you? Is that possible? It's just an unscheduled visit. Elena smiled at him. Go ahead and finish your work. I'll have a cup of tea quietly and go back. Do you mean you have tea time here? Instead of answering, with a small nod, Elena gestured, pointing under the luxuriously dense Zelkova tree. Then the maids straightened out the cloth and set up the tea and cookies they brought. Elena, sitting gracefully, savored the tea and glanced at the expression of the 4 women. Wow. Oh, All four maids' mouths were half open. The physical stamina of the knights, who took off their tops and exercised their smooth muscles, excited the women who opened their eyes to the opposite sex. And isn't it nice to see? What? What are you talking about? Elena answered back, savoring the tea. You're being so cheeky. How do you explain the redness on your face? That, and stammered and was at a loss for what to do. She didn't know Elena would ask so blatantly. What's the point of playing tricks on ourselves? Elena, who put down the teacup, looked at the knights. Your eyes are looking good. Hey, do you see the knight holding the tree? His body also looks very desirable. He looks like a sculpture. He's not bad. You have a pretty good taste in men. I'm sure you belong to the second knight's division. Elena was looking for someone anxiously. Ice Knight Herobard. 3 years from now, Herobard would become the youngest commander of the Second Order, and would be known as the best knight in the Empire, both to himself and others. Aside from his excellent swordsmanship, his cold and emotionally unreadable appearance earned him the title of Ice Knight in the eyes of the public. Only 2 years later, Herobard was called one of the 3 swords that protect the Empire. The first sword, Veronica, a founding sword handed down in the imperial family. The second sword, the Knight of the Ice, Herobard, and the third sword, the Wild Wolf, Ren. Considering that the first sword is a real sword, it's irrelevant. It's safe to say that Herobard, along with Ren, are the highest swordsmen of the Empire. Elena was working hard to get him. He should be here. Why can't I see him? Elena drank tea to moisten her thirst with nervousness. Look at that. Elena put the teacup down on the pedestal and stood up. She walked gracefully out of the shade of the tree and across the middle of the parade ground. The knights couldn't take their eyes off Elena, who suddenly stormed in. Elena approached the unnamed knight who was training with a lot of sweat nearby. Why, Your Highness the Princess? The bewildered knight quickly became polite. I couldn't sit still watching you from afar. What? What do you mean? The knight took a breath without even realizing it. Elena took out a handkerchief embroidered with the symbol of the great house and wiped the sweat off the knight's forehead. Elena said, looking at the knight standing out with a tingling look. Because of your enthusiasm, the great house still exists as of today. I will always have a grateful heart. The knight was so moved that he couldn't speak. Elena's touch, the sincerity of the words, was conveyed, making his heart flutter. Elena wiped the sweat off the foreheads and chins of some knights. Then she walked before Herobard. You have no idea how much I miss you, Ice Knight. She wanted to shake hands with him because she was glad to see him, but she held it in. Instead, she replaced the untranslatable welcome with a fascinating smile that shook the social world. Herobard's face, when he met eyes with her, turned into embarrassment. He looked beyond Elena's profound gaze, the corners of her lips, and her eyes that seemed to be sucking him in. Herobard was at a loss with the seductive smile. He was completely out of his mind. You're still young. Was it because he was 3 years younger than in her past life? Herobard was somehow immature. She couldn't erase the feeling of him being immature. On the other hand, Elena's smile was fatal. Herobard did not know the true nature of the flames that were pouring deep into his heart like an active volcano. He was overwhelmed by the beating of the heart and the confusion of the opposite sex. Nevertheless, it was very impressive to see him bite his molars tightly so that he wouldn't collapse. There may be a momentary disruption, but he showed a willingness not to lose his composure. It was an accidental visit, but I was very impressed with you all today. There are many strong, honorable, loyal knights. So I made up my mind. Elena put her delicate hands on her chest. She took a deep breath as if calming down her overwhelming expression and looked back at the knights. It's late, but I think I'll finish the appointment within a few days. It will be a proper appointment. Finally! Expectations were high on the full face of the knights. Who was Princess Veronica? She was the heir to the Grand Duchy, which may take over the great power in the future. Being a direct knight of such Veronica was a very glorious and honorable affair, so any knight had no choice but to covet. I was so sorry that I didn't have a chance to know how great individuals you all are because I wasn't feeling well. The atmosphere of the nights became solemn. The princess, who returned after battling the disease for several years, was pitiful, but her heart was very kind. I want to find out now. So please come to the appointment ceremony. That way, I can see and judge with my own eyes, and then I can appoint a knight. Why, you mean yourself? Yes, I'll do it myself. Elena's firm answer embarrassed James a little. Elena's declaration was unconventional. Major issues such as appointment of a direct knight are dealt with in accordance with the procedure. Even if it was a senior ceremony, it was just a formal event, and direct knights were often decided in advance. I'm already excited about who will be my knight. Elena's eyes, smiling open, were on Herobard, as if she were aiming at him. And Herobard's poker face, which didn't know the meaning of the gaze, was slightly distorted. Unimpeded by Elena, Leobrick handled the work at an alarming rate. I can't believe I'm taking 2 days to finish in half a day. If it was on schedule, I would have already checked the date of the birthday. The Grand Duchy was busy preparing for the birthday banquet of the first Duke Rosette. Knock, knock. This is Lawrence. Come in. Leobrick pressed her temple. She seemed to have become unknowingly sensitive due to Elena's insufferable behavior. Sit down. When he sat on the sofa, Leobrick immediately got to the point. Lord Lawrence, please be a knight of the princess. That's what I wanted. Lawrence said he would do it without hesitation. It was not an easy decision for him, who is a proud knight, to serve Elena as a master even though he knew she was a substitute. Nevertheless, he actively accepted the situation because he wanted to make up for Elena's missing parents. On the surface, you'll have to show loyalty to the princess. And you may have to keep an eye on every move and sometimes control her. Don't worry. Could I ask you a favor before I carry out the mission? That's unexpected. Lord Lawrence has done everything I asked. Go ahead. Let me wash away my tarnished honor the day my Lady Princess Veronica returns to her place. He served a fake princess. If he didn't know, he would have been able to do so. The work for the great house was done, but the order was quite disgraceful for the knight. For that reason, Lawrence hoped to kill the fake princess with his own hands someday. A breathtaking silence filled between Elena and Leobrick. Leobrick, who called Elena into her office, had been holding her mouth shut for at least a half hour. If it were Elena in the past, she would have had pins and needles and been busy trying to keep her head down. However, this kind of pressure had no effect on Elena. It was widely expected what Leobrick would say, and she had prepared a reasonable countermeasure against it. Elena was even bored with this time. Eventually, Elena, who hated wasting meaningless time, ended her silence with a very sorry face. What else did I do wrong? Are you really asking because you don't know? There was a chill in Leobrick's low voice. Elena lifted her head and carefully opened her mouth, looking at Leobrick's face. I'm sorry. I honestly don't know. I took a walk in the patronage, and when I got to the training ground, I met the knights and said a few words. How many words did you say? Shudder. Elena shivered in response to Leobrick's edgy response. I remembered your promise to me. A saying that I can appoint a noble knight. My heart was pounding like crazy. The fact that there would be a knight for me. That's why I talked about it. I'm going to appoint the noblest man in the Grand Duchy as my knight. Is this such a bad thing? Elena's speech was clever. She blamed Leobrick for the appointment. She didn't even mention any questionable issues. What was more spectacular was Elena's expression. You. Leobrick held back her anger. Don't you know? I'm upset that the princess said she was calling the knights to the ceremony without even having a word of discussion with me. Was that wrong? Then I'm so sorry, Liv. I didn't know. When I learned the literature, the Song of Roland, or the Ceremony of the Empire, I only knew that fellow knights gathered at the ceremony to prove your oath. Elena made excuses for the feat in her favor. Nevertheless, she did not forget to give off a nuance of remorse after realizing her mistake. Ha, that's the only reason. Feeling unbearable anger, Leah Brick could no longer be suspicious. Elena was originally a vain person. In particular, the Oath of Knights was one of Elena's dreams even before she left for the duchy. It was also her fault that she had overlooked it even though she knew it. I'm sorry, Liv. I would have nothing to say even if I had 10 mouths. I didn't know that. I'll be careful. When Elena apologized in a low-key manner, Leah Brick bit her molar and calmed down her anger. It was already spilled. The princess' mouth heralded a major appointment ceremony. Dozens of knights had heard of it, and by now, it would be so prolific that no one wouldn't know about it. Finding words to make an excuse for Veronica, who hasn't appeared in society for the first time in 2 years, would create another scandal. Leah Brick prioritized the appointment of Lawrence as Elena's immediate knight for the intended purpose. If the goal was achieved, it was not important whether it is a private appointment or an open appointment ceremony. If it keeps going like this, we have no reason to wait. Liv, don't forget your resolution. Elena's wish to say that she would never do it again ended this time. Even though the cold atmosphere eased a bit, Elena was looking at her face and lowering her head. Leah Brick, who drenched her throat with a sip of tea, asked Elena, Princess, do you remember I said I was going to introduce you to a knight? Yes, I've been waiting for that. He's been waiting in the drawing room for a while. Elena was surprised. And now? I look terrible after taking a walk. Don't bother. He even admires that look of a princess. Leah Brick on the sofa pulled a book from the bookshelf on the wall. The wall on which the paintings were displayed next to the bookcase opened, and the secret door leading to the living room and passage was opened. Elena opened her eyes like a rabbit who was surprised. A clever woman. She was once again surprised by Leah Brick's leadership. Elena said earlier that she would choose her own knight at the appointment ceremony, with the nuance that there was no knight nominated. Meanwhile, having a private meeting with Lawrence, who was a knight, was conscious that there is a possibility that may raise unfairness about the appointment process internally. You miss one, but you don't miss the other. Unfortunately, this card was useless. Instead, Elena was able to pull the reins of her mind, which almost loosened. Twaddle. Over the secret door, Lawrence, dressed in silver armor, came over and was respectfully courteous. Greetings to your highness, I am Knight Lawrence. Raise your head. Lawrence's eyes with his chin were on Elena. The eyes of the two clashed and stared at each other. First, act like a shy girl. Elena blushed and avoided eye contact. However, she stole a glance at Lawrence's face and was embarrassed. Then the corners of Lawrence's mouth crept up. It was a short moment, but he found out that Elena liked him. I've heard a lot from Liv. You're much more handsome than I've ever heard, and you're a great knight. It's an honor, your highness. If I may, forgive my rudeness. Excuse me? Lawrence boldly approached Elena and kneeled on one knee. Then he reached out his hand and kissed the back of Elena's hand. Despicable, reflexively swinging her hand, she almost struck Lawrence's face. It was the last life, but he was a knight that betrayed Elena and put a sword through her body. It was disgusting to see the hateful side up close, and a kiss on the back of her hand. Elena stammered as if she were embarrassed. She also flushed red as if she were blushing. Technically, it was because of the anger that boiled up at the moment, but it somehow matched well with the current situation. How do you feel? Leah Brick smiled and said, I'm sure there's no knight better than Lord Lawrence in the great house. It looks like that. I've never seen a knight as wonderful as Lord Lawrence in my life. Elena gave a glimpse of the eye in acknowledgement. Then the smile on Lawrence's lips thickened. It was actually a shiny-looking face, and just looking at it made her upset. I told you, didn't I? I'm sure he's a perfect knight for the princess. In fact, Lawrence had a handsome face. I would like to present my sword, my honor, and my life by your side. Lord Lawrence. Elena acted with a touch of emotion. That's what you got across to me. Liv, thank you so much. If it wasn't for Liv, I wouldn't have found a man like Lord Lawrence. I feel like my dream has come true. I'm relieved to hear that. For the first time in a while, Leobrick was satisfied. She was convinced that Elena fell in love with him, who couldn't take her eyes off him. On another day in the Grand Hall, Elena put her feet on the shoes decorated with glass drops and raised her waist. Elena's whole body was caught in the mirror as her wavy red blonde hair fell behind her back. She was like a rose with the off-shoulder dress that revealed her neckline and shoulder line, and makeup that made her eyes look like roses. Why, you're so beautiful. Is that so? Elena asked back in sincerely Aten's pure admiration. Oh, Liv's waiting outside? Yes, she's been here a while. I forgot because I was dressing up. Tell them to go out and have her come in. Elena had Leobrick, who had been looking for her under the pretext of dressing up, stand in the hallway for a long time. Liv, you've been waiting a long time, haven't you? I'm sorry. It's a good day, so I've been waiting too long to look pretty. Elena looked sorry when she saw Leobrick, who looked like she had escaped like a low tide. Are you ready? Yeah. Liv, how am I? Do I look pretty? I hope I look pretty in his eyes. Elena, reflected in Leobrick's eyes, was like a young maiden enamored with her knight. Elena could not take off her pathetic girlhood, even if she said, "Don't lose the dignity that fits the position of Princess Veronica. That may make her easier to handle." With such desire and vanity, she would just have a hard time with Sir Lawrence. I'm sure. I guarantee it. Thank you. I'm so excited that my heart is about to explode. I feel like I'm dreaming. How was it yesterday? Elena had tea time with Lawrence for the past 4 days. It was an investment to pretend to be in love with Lawrence and show perfect performance. It was an enchanting time. All I had to do was drink a cup of tea. I loved that time when he was standing by my side without a word. He's so reliable and down to earth. Lord Lawrence is a lucky knight. He's been chosen by the princess. Is that how it works? A big smile fell on Elena's lips when she let it float. Make sure you pledge your oath to Lord Lawrence today. You shouldn't be a bad girl who ignores the admiration of an honorable knight. What do you mean a bad girl? I can never betray his sincerity. Elena said she hated the term bad girl, and that it would never happen. As if it were trustworthy, Leobrick did not bring it up anymore. It's been a long time. Let's go, princess. When Leobrick stepped back and offered her to move forward, Elena moved her feet. Every time she moved on with her chic and elegant steps, Leobrick and the ladies followed her politely. The procession leading up to Elena reached the Central Training Center. At the Central Military Training Center, where the official appointment ceremony of the Grand Duchy was held, about 100 knights lined up in line with columns. The knights, wearing silver armor and bearing the symbol of the great house on their chests, looked more dignified than ever. Princess, go up. When Leobrick recommended the podium, Elena picked up her skirt slightly and climbed the stairs. I'm warning you, but I won't allow any unexpected action. Act as you memorized it. Reflecting on her near anti-threatening advice, Elena climbed onto the podium at the height of an adult male's shoulders. Say greetings to Princess Veronica. James, the head of the second knights, led the knights just below the podium on behalf of the first knights, who were unable to attend due to external dispatch. Click, click. The knights pulled out their swords in a disciplined gesture and raised them above their heads. And as the pouring sunlight penetrated the body, the handle was pulled to the pallet. A series of actions completed without a single error was an example of a knight that promises eternal loyalty and obedience to the Lord. Elena returned the greeting by putting her hands together and being polite. 9 lines, 3 from the left. Elena, who was looking at the faces of the knights, had a smile of relief around her mouth. She was worried that he might not come out, but it was just a concern. He was here. Right here at the Central Training Center. Elena, who came down from the podium, walked to the members of the knights lined up. It was immediately followed by Leobrick and James, the second knight's division leader. James introduced Elena when she stopped in front of a knight standing on his feet. This is Lord Hamel. He is a strong man in the First Knights, and a master of stenography. He's a knight with the courage to always be at the forefront of the battlefield. You look as brave as ever. Elena walked slowly and repeatedly stood in front of the interesting knights and was introduced. This was because they were asking for the image of a princess who was interested in the knights, since they decided to hold a massive appointment ceremony. Round and round Elena's shoes stood in front of Lawrence. What about this guy? This is Sir Lawrence. He's a strong man and 3 fingers throughout the entire order, and he's called a white lion because of his beautiful appearance. Leobrick, who had been silent until now, also said a word. He's a knight that your highness is also watching. Father? Elena paced in front of Lawrence. It was an expression of interest. Judging from Lawrence's skill in the knights, there was nothing strange about being appointed. Elena, who was hesitating, turned around and passed by. The most embarrassing thing was Lawrence, who believed he would be chosen. His uncharacteristically shaky eyes suggested his embarrassment. Such a reaction was not much different from that of Leobrick's. What are you doing? It was a completely unexpected development. As agreed in advance, Elena was supposed to point to Lawrence, who had been struggling, and take the oath on the spot. The plan was on the verge of falling apart. Elena was paying attention to other members of the knights who had never even looked at her. No way. Leobrick's palms were flushed with sweat from the surging nervousness. It was extensive. It was a personnel appointment. Once appointed, they could not be held back in any circumstances. There were even many eyes to see. All the members of the knights who participated in the appointment ceremony were witnesses. Elena, whether she was or not, moved between the knights. Tuck. Elena's walk, which seemed unlikely to stop, finally stopped. Can you introduce him to me? Elena's attention thinned Leobrick's eyes. She didn't have a chance to figure him out because he was a new knight that didn't show much since it hasn't been long since he came in. This is Sir Hurobard from the Second Knights. He's a new knight who was appointed just 10 days ago. Elena raised her chin and stared at Hurobard. Was it because the first meeting left a strong impression? Elena's blatant gaze felt the body of Hurobard shaking slightly. Can you tell me more? He's from the Eastern Front, so he's very good at horseback riding. Other than that, he's just... James didn't seem to know much about Hurobard, even though he was a member of the Second Knights. Hurobard was also a newcomer, but he didn't feel any affection for him compared to when he introduced other knights. I beg your pardon, Your Highness the Princess, and Sir Hurobard, he is a commoner and has not yet been trained, so he still lacks the virtues, skills, sophistication, and sword skills to be a knight. So, I don't think he's enough to be a direct knight. Really? Elena looked up at Hurobard with a sad face. Thought he was devalued by James in his presence, but his expression didn't change a bit. That's why they call him the Knight of Ice. Hurobard became the sword of the Grand Duke and began to gain fame in the Empire from the defeat of the Northern rebels later this year. Assuming that his sword skills didn't improve within the last month or two, Hurobard was already a strong knight. Maybe he's hiding his talent. Elena rolled her eyes and glanced at Leobrick. As soon as their eyes met, she lowered her eyes and showed signs of conflict, driving the atmosphere. I've decided. James and Leobrick paid attention to the cautious but stubborn voice. Lord Hurobard, put down your sword. Why, Your Highness the Princess? James was at a loss what to do. Next to him, Leobrick stared at Elena with a devilish face.